Apex is a miserable experience that I don't want to discuss any more than I have to. This Edward Drake written and directed actioner lacks both style and substance, features an incredibly weak performance from Bruce Willis, and butchers what otherwise could have been an interesting concept about people who pay money in order to hunt people on a getaway island resort for sport as if they were a freaking predator with a garish sense of style. The movie is a weak cinematic experience light with action and fun, all while being heavy with boredom, dialogue that explains the characters' motivations rather than showing us through action, and basic filmmaking 101 mistakes. And honestly, Apex just sucks all the way around. It's flimsy and crumbles under any sort of critical scrutiny, which kind of makes it the cinematic equivalent of a meal from Taco Bell. Though admittedly that comparison is unfair to Taco Bell, because at least eating that shit doesn't take over 90 minutes. God, this movie sucks. Apex's issues start with its dull story. The plot takes place in the future and follows Bruce Willis, who's technically playing a character, but I'm just gonna call him Future Bruce Willis in this review because he's essentially Future Bruce Willis. In the movie, Future Bruce Willis is spending time in prison for a crime that isn't really fully explained at all. Like, did he hit a jaywalker with a car? Did he piss off the top of the Sears Tower? Did he refuse to wear a mask at a pharmacy during a pandemic? I don't know, and I don't care. But things change for Future Bruce Willis when he is offered a chance for freedom by participating in Apex, which is a business where 6 wealthy dipshits go on a deserted island, arm themselves to the teeth, and hunt an unarmed combatant, because the ultra-wealthy view murder the same way a 6-year-old from the Midwest views Disney World. And once there, Future Bruce Willis must survive these 6 combatants and come out on top. That's it. That is the movie. Apex's story fails to develop its characters. In fact, most of the character motivations in this movie are explained to the audience through clunky dialogue that Future Bruce Willis and other characters speak with complete disinterest and emotional absence. For example, the movie tells us that Future Bruce Willis is dangerous. It tells us that he has historical baggage, but it never shows us these things, which is bad seeing as film is a visual medium by design. And to make matters worse, a lot of the film's character development and expository dialogue are told through uninteresting and filmmaking basic shot reverse shot editing, and combined with the stilted performances and the awkward dialogue, there are many scenes in this film where a character boringly asks a question, then the movie cuts to a second character who lazily answers, then cuts back to the first character so they respond with disinterest, and then cuts back to the second character, and the process repeats over and over again because Apex is a lot like a cinematic rendition of Insanity, but boring. Oh so boring. The action is somehow even worse, mostly because there isn't much in the way of inventiveness here. See, in most action movies of this type, a character like Future Bruce Willis, maybe let's say past Bruce Willis, would pick off baddies one at a time, defeating them with intelligent strategy, skill, determination, and grit. But that doesn't really happen in Apex. In fact, the majority of the hunters in this movie are killed by other hunters, because, you know, the most dangerous game is an enemy that fights back. And while this idea could have been interesting if Future Bruce Willis played off his adversaries' insecurities, or the fact that they're soulless billionaires who are paying for the thrill of killing a human opponent, Future Bruce Willis does fuck all here. These antagonistic adversaries just murder each other, whilst Future Bruce Willis is worthless and barely does anything to meaningfully advance the story for the first 2/3 of the movie. He doesn't implement any form of combat strategy or pull an awesome stunt to defeat the bad guys. He mostly just sits on his ass whilst the bad guys kill each other, essentially failing upwards, which is just not very exciting action cinema. Future Bruce Willis's inaction in this action movie eventually creates a dissonance at the film's conclusion as well, which, spoilers, but who gives a shit. After Future Bruce Willis barely does anything for most of the film, Dr. Samuel Rainsford, i.e. the top hunter on this human poaching expedition, goes on a cornball spree about how Future Bruce Willis is an impressive specimen and is quite the adversary, that he is his antagonistic opposite, even though Future Bruce Willis never earns that designation in this film, because he didn't kill most of these asshole hunters. These rich dipshits did that themselves. And let's be honest, millionaires and billionaires aren't the type of people who normally allow the working class to take credit for anybody's work, let alone their own. So when Rainsford talks about how Future Bruce Willis is the ultimate challenge, this conflict has no emotional resonance with the audience because it is unearned and makes no sense with the narrative and character development established on screen that is actually in this film. It is pure nonsense. And honestly, that is Apex. It is a horrible action film that lacks entertaining value, thematic substance, a meaningful performance from Bruce Willis, or any form of redeemable quality that gives you a reason to watch this film. It is a dull and poorly put together bore fest that you should avoid at all costs, because oh my god, I sure wish I did. And with that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like rating, subscribe, ring the bell, share, or leave a comment telling me about how you will never watch this movie. Also, please consider checking out my Patreon page. The link is in the description. And speaking of Patreon, I just want to thank my patrons, especially my high tier ones, and David, Samantha, Devlin, Mom, and Morgan. Thank you so much for supporting what I do. Love y'all.